Now, the company officials in Madras, company also had its settlement in Madras. Uh, that was under the command of Robert Clive. Robert Clive was also a very cunning and powerful leader. He was also very keen interest and follower of very authoritarian regime. So he retaliated by reinforcing naval fleets to Bengal. Now, again, negotiation, another round of negotiation, it happened, and all the negotiations with the Nawab, it was getting prolonged, and all the negotiations, it failed, because neither the East India Company was ready to back off, nor the Nawab was ready to back off. Both wanted their authoritative claims on the state of Bengal. So finally, in 1757, what Robert Clive did was he marched against the company's army, against Sirajuddaulah at Palasi. Now, along with the forces that he had in Calcutta, that he had in Bengal, he marched with additional number of forces from Madras, along with the naval fleet that he had, and he went into battle with Sirajuddaulah. Now, Sirajuddaulah could not stand this attack of the East India Company from two sides. Basically, he was also getting attacked with the forces of Robert Clive that he took from Madras, from the state of Madras. So, Sirajuddaulah, he lost the battle. He lost his life also. Why did he lose? Was that the only reason that Robert Clive marched upon his army with his additional numbers of soldiers? No, he lost because one of his men, one of his leader, that was Mir Jafar. He was one of the commanders of Sirajuddaulah. He did not even fight the war. He did not went on to fight the war with Sirajuddaulah, and Sirajuddaulah did not know that. So of course he was under impression that Mir Jafar is going to be in the war from his side, but Mir Jafar, he did not. He had already sided with the English East India Company under the impression that the East India Company had bribed him that you will be the next Nawab after Sirajuddaulah is dead. So Mir Jafar, he betrayed Sirajuddaulah, and that is why Sirajuddaulah lost the Battle of Plassey. English East India Company, they won, and they secured this position by the help of Mir Jafar. And after winning this, they installed Mir Jafar as a puppet ruler on the state of Bengal. The Battle of Plassey, it became very famous in the history of India. Why? Because it was, of course, one of the first battle that was fought by the English East India Company, and they came out victorious in this battle. So this gave them a motivation that they were able to crush these powers, these local powers. So that is why it is regarded as one of the most important event in the history. Now, what happened after the Battle of Plassey? Sirajuddaulah, of course, was assassinated by the English East India Company, and Mir Jafar was reinstated as the Nawab of Bengal. The English East India Company, they wanted a puppet ruler, and now they had the puppet ruler. The company refused. The company still did not want to get into the affairs of the state. They did not want to have the administrative power of the state, because they just wanted to have their focus on the profits of the company. They just wanted to emerge a winning player in the trade. So their prime objective came to be known as expansion of the trade. They were least interested in the administrative affairs of the state. That is why they installed the puppet ruler. But what happened was, even the puppet rulers, they were not that submissive. They did not want it to be the submissive ones. So they tried to exert their power on the company. They tried to exert their authority on the company. And of course, the company did not like that, because I have installed you by going to extents, and you have promised me to be that kind of ruler, and now you're just refusing to be. So the company, after Mir Jafar protested, the company removed Mir Jafar from the post of state of Nawab of Bengal, and they installed Mir Qasim instead of Mir Jafar. So now Mir Qasim was another puppet ruler installed by the company in the Battle of Plassey. So Mir Jafar, he died in 1765. The Mughal emperor appointed the company as the Diwan of the provinces of Bengal, allowing the company to use Bengal's vast revenue sources. So after Mir Jafar died, the company was tired. Now company was tired to install a puppet ruler, and then he would also resist, and now I'll have to go through another war and series of battles and persuade him. So rather, appointing another puppet ruler, we only would act as a diwan of the state. So the Mughal emperor, appointed the company as a diwan and of the provinces of Bengal, allowing the company to use Bengal's vast resources. So at that time, Bengal was also a port. It was also a hub for all the raw materials and all the things that the East India Company wanted for trade. And we have seen here that how they had agreed for the Nawab to pay this kind of amount to finance its wars. Now, this step is a significant step as well, because this has granted them political power of the province of Bengal. Now they are getting politically involved in the affairs of the Indian territory, basically starting from the province of Bengal. After the Battle of Plassey, what happened? From the early 18th century, the company's trade with India had expanded, because now, since they had got this Bengal province, they were having the Diwani of this province, they were having their rule in this province, they were pretty sure that they could expand the trade. And now they were getting more interested in the affairs of the country. The company had to buy most of the goods in India with gold and silver from Britain, as we already discussed. At this time, Britain had no goods to sell in India. Basically, I am bringing money from my country and investing them in your country, buying the goods, and I'm selling your goods to my country, having profit. But right now, I do not have anything to offer you from my country and sell you and take the money from you and take it back to my country. So till now, they do not have that kind of thing to offer to the Indians. The outflow of the gold from Britain slowed after the Battle of Plassey and stopped after the assumption of Diwani, because even after the Battle of Plassey, basically they had won this revenue right. So they were having revenue, easy access of revenues, because they were having 3 villages under their control. Now the puppet Nawab was also in their control. So basically they did not have to get that much of gold from Britain, rather a very small amount. Now after having the Diwani, after assuming the Diwani of the Bengal, they stopped asking for money from their home country altogether. So basically all the revenues that they used to gain from the Diwani of Bengal was a huge province then. They used to invest it in buying the goods. So now they did not have to ask for the money from their country. Revenues from India could finance companies' expenses. These revenues could be used to purchase cotton and silk textiles in India, maintain company troops as well, and meet the cost of building the company forts and offices at Calcutta. So basically, they were not even investing anymore. So they were just taking money from India. They were again investing the money in India. And that money was sufficient not just to maintain the trade, but to maintain the fortifications, to maintain their living there, to maintain the purchase of everything, to maintain the troops as well. So basically, that money which they were gaining from the revenue of Bengal was enough for everything. And in the end, they would also save some money and send back home. So we can see that what kind of revenue Bengal was giving to the British East India Company. Now, what happened to the actual Nawabs? This picture of Rihanna is hilarious in this, acting like a queen. After the Battle of Plassey, the actual Nawabs of Bengal were forced to give land and vast sums of money as personal gift to the company officials. So basically, when you have gained Nawabi of such a vast place, vast territory, and the Mughals are recognizing your Diwani, then the other Nawabs, has to the other Nawabs that were there in Bengal, they also have to recognize you as a Nawab also of Bengal. So they also started bringing gifts and personal gifts to the company officials as well. The fall of Robert Clive. So Robert Clive amassed a huge fortune in India. He had to come to Madras from England. He had come to Madras from England in 1743 at the age of 18, and when he went back, he had gained that much of wealth. I'll tell you, he had gained that much of wealth. This is the figure that is there, but we all know that what official figures are. So let's just imagine that it's just a figure. He might have gained a little more than that, or a lot more than that. He had gained so much of wealth that he was tried for this. Like, people, they accused him for having such amount of wealth with him, that he was tried for that. When he was appointed governor of Bengal in 1764, he was asked to remove corruption in the company. administration, but he was himself cross-examined in 1772 by the British Parliament, which was suspicious of his vast wealth. So basically, when you have gone, you have, of course, you do not have that kind of fortune, but when you have come back, you're like one of the richest person in the Britain. So of course, people would get suspicious that how did you amass this kind of wealth when you are claiming that you had no corruption in the company's administration. If you're not giving us the money which you are bringing as revenue, how could you amass that much of wealth? So, of course, the committee was set up to look into his wealth. Although he was acquitted of all these allegations, he committed suicide in 1774. So, we do not know the reason for his suicide, but it might be because he was, leveled for so many charges of corruption and gaining that kind of wealth from Indian territories when he came back. So that is how the fall of Robert Clive occurred. Robert Clive being the first, the first person who fought in the name of the British East India Company to the Nawabs and, established the Nawabi there. So that is how he becomes significant in our history, the British history. Now the company rule expands. How is it expanding? Let's see. Now, appointing the residents, who were these residents and how they came to be a very important source of the interference of the English East India Company in the administration of the local Nawabs and rulers. Now, after the Battle of Buxar that happened in 1764, the company appointed residents in the Indian states. Now, who were these residents and what role did they have to play in the business of the company, in the affairs of the company? These were political and commercial agents of the company. They were supposed to, enhance the interest of the company's affairs in the courts of these local Nawabs and rulers. So they were to serve the interest of the company to further the profitable cause, to further the cause of expansion of the trade, expansion of the profit. These residents, as we might also come to the point that these residents were also acting as eyes and ears of the company in the court of the rulers in which they were being. So basically the company now knew that what all kind of affairs, political as well as all various kinds of affairs, were going on in each and every state that these residents were there. They had information of all the states because of these residents, because these residents were a constant source of information as well as their agents of commercial expansion. These residents had to put interest of the company before the Nawabs, but further they also started to interfere with the administration of these areas, the administration of these local rulers. So how they started interfering was they started having a say in who should be the king, which of the sons should be the king, and they started interfering on which policies should be implemented, what are the policies that should be there. So through these residents, the company began interfering in the internal affairs of the states, internal affairs of the Indian states, internal affairs of the Indian rulers. And they also had the source of information, the constant source of information from these residents. Now here we see a picture of an English East India Company official who is a resident. We can see that what kind of lavish life he is living in the courts of the rulers that he was going. We will also see that what were the implications that these residents brought along with them. Now, the policy of subsidiary alliance was one of the very famous and first policy that English East India Company tried to implement in order to exert their authoritative power, in order to exert their authority and control over these rulers, the rulers of the Indian states. Sometimes what the English East India Company they tried to do was they formulated this kind of thing which was called a subsidiary alliance. Now in this alliance, the rulers, they were not supposed to have their army at all. They were supposed to be having the English East India Company. Like the English East India Company, they agreed that they will give their army to these rulers, and these rulers were not supposed to have their own army. Now this army that the English East India Company is going to give, they will have to be maintained by the local rulers. They will have to be maintained, and these subsidiary forces which are protecting the boundaries of these rulers, they were supposed to get maintained. If not, then the company will seize half or any proportion of the land that they want. that is what happened in the subsidiary alliance. Indian rulers were not allowed to have their independent armed forces, but were to be protected by the company. They had to pay the subsidiary forces that the company maintained for protection. This was just a facade, basically. Why? Because the company tried in all its power to resolve any dispute, any of the dispute that arose through its diplomacy and political channels. They never wanted to go into a war. They never wanted to come into a war because, of course, it used to cost them. And now, when the rulers were paying for the subsidiary forces, their forces were getting paid, but they did not have to pay that. So basically, it was a facade. It was veil under which they just wanted to do away with the payment of their own forces. They just wanted someone else to pay for their forces, and they did not even want to use that because they used all kinds of diplomatic channels to, uh, avoid all kinds of wars. If the rulers, now what was the implication if some of the rulers, they did not maintain the army? So if they failed to make the payment, then the part of their territory was taken away by the company. The Nawab Shujauddaulah of Awadh was forced to give half of his territory. Now imagine, half of his territory had to be given because he could not maintain the forces, troops of the company that protected his realm. So because of that, he had to give half of his territory to the English East India Company. Now here we can see that English East India Company were trying to resolve two of its issue here by the subsidiary alliance. First, they wanted someone else to maintain their forces. So they wanted anything to, some ruler to come up and just imposed the subsidiary alliance on them, and they had to now pay maintenance to their forces. So they wanted to do away with the maintenance. First was that, and secondly, they also wanted to somehow indirectly annex the property of these Nawabs, because some or the other way they knew that after some time, these Nawabs would not be able to pay for the maintenance of these forces because the maintenance was very high, and some or the other time, if they fail, then it was a win-win situation for the company, because even before they were not even paying for the maintenance of their own forces, now they were going to have half the territory of the ruler. So of course, it was also a policy of annexation. So this just increased the profit motives of the company. This is Nawab Shujauddaulah with the British resident. The residents were behind all these kinds of policies. They used to exert these policies on the Nawabs. So that was the role they had to play in the British East India Company. Now, East India Company, they had their eyes on Mysore. Why? Because from Mysore, from the markets of Mysore, they used to purchase cardamom, peppers, and company wanted to have, some kind of trade relations going on with the state of Mysore. However, the company resorted to direct military confrontation when it saw a threat to its political and economic interest. And Mysore became that kind of state which enhanced the company's desire to have a direct military confrontation, because it was meddling with the political and economic affairs of the company. How? This can be illustrated with the South Indian state of Mysore. How Mysore meddled with the company's economic profit in its own way. Tipu Sultan was the ruler of Mysore. He was also known as the Tiger of Mysore because once he fought tiger with his own bare hands. That is why he was a very brave and very capable ruler. Mysore grew in strength. Mysore grew in its power under his father, that was Hyder Ali, and the realm of Tipu Sultan. So both these father-son duo, they made Mysore a very mighty power in amongst the Indian states. So Mysore was not an easy enemy. Mysore was not an easy friend as well. So English, of course, for the English, they were not an easy friend, and they were neither an easy enemy. Mysore controlled the trade on the Malabar coast. It had the control over the trade that was going on in the Malabar coast, and the company had its trade in the Malabar coast because they used to buy from there pepper and cardamom. So because of which, the policies of the Tipu Sultan were going to affect the company directly or indirectly in some way, because he was controlling the Malabar coast. Now in 1785, what Tipu Sultan did was he stopped the export of sandalwood, pepper and cardamom, disallowed local merchants from trading with the company, and established a close relationship with the French in India. We now see three steps that were taken by Tipu Sultan from here. these are the three steps that were taken by Tipu Sultan. Now, what could be the intention behind these steps? First, the intention could be that he wanted to increase his trading relationship with French, because he was a close friends with the French officials, with the French company. So of course, because of this, he might have disallowed the local traders to engage in any trading relations with the company. That could have been the implication of his friendship with the French. And he stopped the export of sandalwood, pepper, and cardamom. It might be to increase the relations with French, or it might have its own, local religion, local kind of policy. So that we are not sure of. But to maintain a close relationship with friend, of course, you have to sever your ties with the other company that was also trading there. So that time, Tipu Sultan, he chose his friendship to the French over the trade with the English East India Company, and this proved a loss to the English East India Company. Now they were infuriated with whatever the Sultan was doing. The British, they had this impression of Hyder and Tipu as a very arrogant leaders, as very arrogant and very dangerous kind of leaders, because they were powerful. The British knew that these leaders, they were very powerful and they were not going to be submissive to their demands. So 4 wars were fought with the state of Mysore in the year 1767, 69, 1780 to 84, 1790 to 92, and 1799. You don't have to remember all kinds of dates and all kinds of wars. Just remember the important ones. Underline the important ones. The important ones were 1790 to 92, in which Tipu Sultan, because of attack from all the territories, neighboring territories, from the combined attack from the Marathas, from the Nizam of Hyderabad, and from the East India Company, he had to succumb, and he had to give his son as hostage to the English East India Company. This was an important war, so remember this. And of course, in the Battle of Seringapatam, which happened in 1799, Tipu Sultan was killed defending his capital. So Tipu Sultan lost his battle with the English East India Company. They grew mightier in the power than Tipu Sultan. But this doesn't mean that Tipu Sultan was not modernized in any way. If you read about the history of Tipu Sultan, which we will read in the further chapters, he used to maintain very modern kind of soldiers, modern kind of cavalry and the fleet. He used to, have these kinds of knowledge from the French company that he used to have. So even after that, he lost the battle, and Mysore was placed under the former dynasty of Wadiyars, and subsidiary alliance was imposed on the Wadiyars as well. So English, they knew that the East India Company, they knew that Tipu Sultan was not going to succumb to their demand of the subsidiary alliance. He was already having a very powerful army under his control. But after Tipu Sultan lost the battle, Wadiyars were placed, and of course they were not a very powerful dynasty, and because of that, the English imposed subsidiary alliance on them. Now, war with the Marathas. English had many enemies. English East India Company had many enemies. They tried annexing the territories because their desire for power, their desire for authority, their desire for having to own the lands increased after they won each of the battles that they fought. So they had this war with Marathas as well. In the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, Marathas' dream of ruling Delhi was shattered. In the first war, let's have a series of war. In the first Battle of Panipat, first and the second battle also, nobody was victorious. In the first Battle of Panipat, there was no clear victory. And in the second Battle of Panipat, the war was, fought by the Marathas from various fronts. So British, they captured some of the areas of Odisha. So because of that, the Marathas kind of lost in the second Battle of Panipat as well. Now in the third Battle of Panipat, it was really, really clear that the Marathas were not going to rule Delhi because they were crushed totally by the English East India Company. The Peshwa, which was there in the power of the confederation of all the Maratha Sardars, he lost the battle, and he was disbanded from where he was reigning from. The Marathas were divided into states under different chiefs, that is Sardars, from dynasties such as Scindia, Holkar, Gaikwad, and Bhosle. Peshwa, who was the principal minister of all these confederacy, he was the military and administrative head of the confederacy of all these chiefs, the senior chiefs. Maharji Sindhia and Nana Fadnis were two famous Maratha soldiers and statesmen of the late 18th century. Now, these had a very huge role to play in the battles of Maratha warfare. So we all know that in Third Battle of Panipat, Maratha power they lost with the English against the English, and the Peshwa had to leave Pune. He had to leave his administrative place. He was disbanded, and now he was not the chief of the administrative and political power of Maratha kingdom anymore. Let's have a look at the first war of the first Maratha War, Anglo-Maratha War, ended in 1782 with the Treaty of Saibai, in which no one was victorious. Basically, it was a draw between the English East India Company and the Marathas. The second Anglo-Maratha War happened in 1803-5. British gained the territories of Odisha and the territories of north of Yamuna River, including Agra and Delhi. Why they gained it? Because the war was fought by the Marathas by several fronts. They were not, they were not very united. The war was fought in several fronts, and because of which the English was able to crush some of the places, some of the areas from which the Marathas were fighting. So Odisha, Agra and Delhi, north of Yamuna River, that is Odisha, Agra and Delhi, all these areas were captured in the second Anglo-Maratha War. Of course, the third Battle of Panipat, they lost this. Third Anglo-Maratha War crushed the Maratha power absolutely to its very core and removed the Peshwa, and he was sent away to Bithur. It was near Kanpur with a pension. Now he was not even in control of, all the revenues of Maratha. He was just sustained on a pension which was given by the English East India Company only, and now he was sent to Bithur. We'll see that how from Kanpur his descendants they fought in the first war of independence in the further chapters. The company now had complete control over the territory south of the Vindhya range. Now, they were able to crush Mysore. We have seen that they were able to crush Mysore. And from the second Anglo-Maratha War, they also had control over the state of Odisha. And now from the third Anglo-Maratha War, that is the third Battle of Panipat, now they controlled whole of the Maratha Empire. So now they had entire control, absolute control over the territory south of the Vindhya range.